You don't know the power of the dark side.
What's going on, guys? Back in with another video. I apologize for not being as consistent as I have been in my earlier time of starting uploading videos. When I first started doing this, I initially was super ambitious and I was going to upload a video every day and, just be on it. But with life and work and everything else, it's just kind of unrealistic to do that. So I'm going to try to keep it consistent, try to do 2 to 3 videos a week. And I know that's doable. I just haven't had time this past week. So anyway, guys, aside from all that, let's get into my top 5 favorite Star Wars characters, period. Now, I could probably do top 10, but I would be sitting here thinking about it forever. So my top 5 is pretty easy to name off. And it's also probably a pretty common top 5. I'm not here to blow your mind with any crazy rankings, but I would say these top 5 characters are pretty well-rounded in terms of everybody else's popularity. Number 5 is kind of like a 4-way tie because it's not too far down to where, I love most Star Wars characters, right? I think we all do. But once you get up in the upper tier, it's kind of hard. It gets hard to pick and choose who's, better than others. So number 5 is probably a 5-way tie with Palpatine / Sidious / the Emperor. It's all the same person, right? However you want to label him. Just because of his importance. He was pulling the strings the entire time through all 6 films. I guess 9 if you want to consider those 3, but I don't. You can't tell the story of Star Wars without him just being, from George Lucas himself, pretty much the devil. He is evil encompassed in a person. So he's on this list, and just for simplicity's sake, he's my number 5. Like I said, it's kind of a tie between him and Rex and Ahsoka. I really love Grand Admiral Thrawn, but there are some things that kind of weigh those characters down. I really love Ahsoka in the Clone Wars. I think she does a great job of being our character in the story, and we kind of see the war through her. And of course, Rex is just probably the greatest clone that the Grand Army has seen. His relationship with Ahsoka and Anakin and his brothers is exactly what they were doing by making the Clone Wars and telling the story of the clones. Thrawn, you as well know that I love the Thrawn novels and get to see him in live action. But, with Ahsoka, the Ahsoka series, I kind of feel like her character did some things in which we really wouldn't have seen in the animated series. Now, that's a story for another time, but that just adds to why I'm making the decision that I am as to her not being number 5 on my list. Number 4 is probably going to be Maul, just because when I was a kid, I was 3 years old when The Phantom has come out. I wasn't old enough to know about it, but I just remember being a kid and seeing his face on all the toys that I had growing up. I remember just watching The Phantom Menace as I got older and being like, this dude's badass looking. So that's kind of like a nostalgic thing for me, but especially with what we got to see with his character in the Clone Wars and Rebels and so on, that it just exemplifies what I already loved about him. So yeah, he's number 4 on my list. Number 3 and number 2 could be passed back and forth any day of the week. Like I said, these characters are probably neck and neck, but to make things easier, I would say number 3 is probably Luke Skywalker. I love Luke Skywalker in the expanded universe and the original trilogy. Mind you, I don't think anyone really likes his character in the sequels. They just did a bad job writing him. Luke Skywalker is the epitome of a great Jedi because he has all the characteristics of his father in terms of ferocity and passion, but he's not selfish with it. He doesn't do things for himself, he does things for others. So even the decision he made to leave Yoda and go save his friends, knowing that it was probably a bad idea, and Yoda even told him, you're not ready. Well, I have to save my friends or they're going to die. it just goes to show the compassion that he has for those he loves. And, some would argue that the Jedi of old, that was their downfall, is they were just too robotic. They didn't make any decisions based on, you know, compassion and a selfless love. And the story of Star Wars is Luke Skywalker, and especially with the expanded universe, they couldn't really touch on anything before the original trilogy because Lucas had plans to make those films. So you just see so much more of his character development with the novels after the 3 films. And yeah, I mean, if you love Star Wars, you probably love Luke Skywalker. Number 2, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The older you get and the more mature you get, you realize that Obi-Wan Kenobi dealt with a lot of shit and he went through a lot of terrible things and he was still a good person at the end of it. He watched his master die, killed the first Sith in 1,000 years, didn't turn to the dark side, took on an apprentice he couldn't handle because his master wanted him to, did the best he could to train him. Mind you, he wasn't the father Anakin needed, he was more so the brother. Did the best he could, I feel like, training Anakin, and inevitably he fell to the dark side. Did what he had to do to try and stop him. Left him for dead, presuming that he would die on Mustafar. And 20 years later, fought him again on the Death Star, sacrificing himself so that Luke, Leia, and the others could escape. The last thing he saw was Luke reunited with his sister. And yeah, of course, and you have Satine dying and all that in between there. But Obi-Wan Kenobi is not a perfect Jedi, but he is a great person. And I think that is what makes him such a great Jedi. Is because you could sit here and be like Mace Windu or Yoda and be dogmatic and try to be by the book. And look what happened to their order, The older I get, the more I appreciate Alec Guinness's performance in A New Hope, first and foremost. Just because he took something that had no context behind it, at least not the context in which we see now. When Luke's asking him, "Oh, you knew my father," and you see the acting skills that Alec Guinness portrays of the sadness and the regret that he has for what happened to Anakin, it's beautiful because at that time that wasn't the story that was being told, but in hindsight and retrospect, it just meshes so well, and I just appreciate his character. I love Ewan McGregor. I love that Obi-Wan Kenobi, but man, like I said, the more I watch the original trilogy, the more I really just love Alec Guinness's performance. So that's why he's number 2 on this list. And number 1, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's Anakin / Vader. Some would argue that it's not the same person, but it's the same person. So Anakin, Darth Vader, same person. That's my number 1. I mean, Star Wars wouldn't be Star Wars without Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. One being arguably the greatest Jedi in his time. Mind you, he was flawed and he acted a lot out of emotion and selfishness and passion, and we saw what happened. But he did what he could for those that he cared about, and that was something the Jedi didn't really do at that point in time. You know the stories. You've seen the stories of the Clone Wars, the hero with no fear. That's part of the Matthew Stover's novelization. Yeah, Star Wars wouldn't be Star Wars without Anakin, and then Darth Vader, arguably the most iconic villain of movie history. Period. I mean, top 3, if not number 1. Everybody who hasn't even seen Star Wars knows who Darth Vader is. The most fearsome, ruthless, brutal villain in cinematic history. Just a guy that made some terrible decisions and lived 20 years with the results. So I sympathize with Vader and Anakin. And I think that, yeah, they could have told the story a little better, especially with him like that, flipping to the dark side. But overall, episodes 1 through 6 tell a pretty cohesive story. And like I said, Return of the Jedi's third act is the most satisfying of all because it just ties everything together, and Anakin fulfills the prophecy, which I really wish they didn't do that anyway, but yeah, he redeems himself. He is redeemed. So anyway, not to get into like the emotional aspect of it as to why I love these characters so much. It's just my top 5 favorite off the top. Like I said, I could probably go into a top 10, but after 5, it kind of get kind of tricky because there's a lot of characters that are notable. Anyway, guys, let me know your favorite character or your top 5 down in the comments, and hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, check out more videos. We'll see you in the next one.